Hello, college football fans. We're back for another edition of Urban's Take with Urban Meyer and yours truly, Tim May. Urban, you want to get right on talking, or want to say hi to the folks?
It's always good to be with you, and big week for the Buckeyes this week.
Well, the reason I was asking is because I think Big Noon Kickoff is headed for the University of Michigan this week, or whatever you call University of Michigan. And I'm thinking you're starting to already itch already, right? About going to that place. Well, how do you prepare for going to the University of Michigan, Urban?
Well, they're passionate fan base, and we're going to have good security. And I'll tell you, they got a heck of a team this year, but you just don't know. That they look fast. They look well coached with the two new coordinators. But how do you prepare to go to Ann Arbor? It's like Columbus, Ohio. It's like Tuscaloosa. It's a great, passionate fan base that cares deeply, and there's probably not a lot of like for that guy that used to coach Ohio State. But I think that everyone knows I have incredible respect for the Wolverines. Always have. I was great friends, or not great friends, but I was friends with Bo Schembechler, and he was a mentor of mine. I actually went to go spend some time with him when I first went to Bowling Green.
Yeah.
I grew up in the 10-year war, so I always tell people there's rivalries and then there's the game.
Yeah.
There's no comparison.
Yeah. I wasn't making fun too much there, but I would think you get a little case of hives or something when you get close to Ann Arbor. That's just me. I mean, knowing your background and stuff. But, dude, this is Maryland versus Michigan, a battle of unbeatens. Is this a true battle of well, obviously their record says so, but I think over the next several weeks, some imposters are going to be found out. What's your take on that?
Yeah, you just don't know, Tim. Big Noon did a study of it's Minnesota and the Wolverines, by the way, look fantastic on videotape. Minnesota looked great. And then they threw the stat out at us, a Sagarin rating, that the Wolverines had the 190th most difficult schedule to date. 190. There's only 130 Division I teams, and then Minnesota's worse than that. And that's no one's fault. When you schedule teams like Colorado State, Hawaii, and Connecticut, Connecticut has had a little bit of history, but Colorado State used to be a top 30 team.
Yeah.
And these schedules are done 10 years in advance. Hawaii, I've coached against Hawaii many times. That's usually a fist fight. And Hawaii is really down. They've had some coaching transition, but I watched the videotape and I was shocked at how much they're struggling. And same with Colorado State. So that's not the Wolverines' issue.
Yeah.
They came out and played really penalty-free, turnover, not many turnovers, very clean, and they look fast to me. But once again, you just don't know. Maryland is pretty good. They have 3 legitimate draft picks at wide receiver. Their quarterback kind of bails the pocket a little fast, but he's athletic. They're playing very well. The running back is number 24. The minute you start spreading out to cover the wideouts, they run it down your throat. So Coach Loxley's done a good job there. I just think the Wolverines have too much talent. I'm a little concerned about that if they keep getting better down the road. That's a good-looking team. That's long, and it's the fastest. I remember when we coached against, they had Peoples-Jones and they had 2 other just really legit wideouts.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I can't remember the names.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember them now too. But go ahead though.
But they look really fast right
now. Yeah. You and I were talking before we started the show this morning that it's really interesting this moment in time for some teams though, because from a practice standpoint, Jim Harbaugh is not a fool. He knows his team has not been physically tested like maybe it might get tested this week against Maryland and vice versa, maybe with Loxley and stuff. But how do you approach practice when you know that on Saturday, this past Saturday, your team, didn't really get that full complement of big-time football thrown at it? You understand what I'm saying?
Sure. The first third of the season, to me, has always been about development. Your team better be much different the last third of the season than the first third. I don't care what kind of team you have. This is not NFL. These are young players. They have a quarterback, McCarthy, extremely talented. I mean, you talk about a good-looking athlete that gets the ball out fast and, a strong arm, live arm. But until a quarterback feels that pocket and gets hit in the face, you don't know what kind of quarterback you have. And so, once again, when you schedule Colorado State, Hawaii, they don't know that, that's the only way to get better is to get tested. The only way to grow is through adversity, is through finding ways that solutions to problems. They haven't had any problems. So we've been caught in that situation for Tim. And what we would do is practice. I remember taking Tuesday and Wednesday, and we would take 2 8-minute segments and go ones-on-ones. I give you the analogy of back when Taylor Decker's, I want him to block Joey Bosa every day in practice.
Yeah.
And when Taylor Decker had to block Joey Bosa every day in practice, he became a first-round draft pick. He's not doing that against the lower-level teams. So I would imagine in Ann Arbor they're doing a lot of good on good. Not tackle because you can't get guys hurt, but you have to develop people right now. And the only way to do that is good on good.
Yeah. Iron versus iron. Iron sharpens iron, that whole thing. I'd rather have steel sharpening steel, but that's just me. That's my preference. Flip side of it is you got Ohio State playing Wisconsin this week, hosting Wisconsin. Ohio State's already gone head-to-head with Notre Dame. Yeah, Notre Dame had a tough time the next week, but one of those reasons is that was a brutal physical last 20 minutes of that Notre Dame-Ohio State game that Ohio State came out on top. Obviously, Wisconsin is known for his physical play through the years. Had a loss a couple of weeks ago to Washington State, a tough loss. But the bottom line is, these two teams, you don't want to beat them up before they go into a heavyweight battle either, right? Because having gone against Wisconsin as a coach, your team's going to take some licks no matter what the scoring margin is, right?
Well, Lou Holtz was my mentor and is my mentor, and I would call him all the time about situations, and he would always come right back at me and say, well, what kind of team do you have? So you can't cookie cutter this thing and say, okay, back way off. I don't know. It depends on, I understand Ohio State's got some, really young players, second string offensive line. The last thing you can do now is back off them. So it's got to be, and Ryan Day is excellent at it. I'm sure he's relying on Knowles and Kevin Wilson, two veteran coaches, saying, okay, maybe the ones you back off a little bit, but the twos you go hard. So it depends what team you have. But the big picture, what you're talking about is exactly right. I used to always, Mickey Marotti and I would, we'd actually chart the older, once I, started getting older and thinking about the health and safety of a player, how many shots can he take?
Yeah.
And so we would actually chart it. It's almost like a pitch count. How many competitive shots against, I'm talking about not scout team, good on good.
Yeah.
And you could chart that. And so a team like Wisconsin, for the rest of our lifetime and prior to us, Wisconsin's known as physical. They're going to be physical. It's a little different style. They're a lot more shotgun now than they've ever been.
Yeah.
I think they're doing a little bit more spread. But at the end of the day, they got a great running back. They're going to come screaming off the ball. That's who they are. That's who they always will be. So I think you really monitor how many shots you give your first team going into it. And then the following week, you have to you have to gauge it. And the only thing I could tell you, I remember we played Alabama in the semifinal, and I had a padded practice scheduled getting ready for Oregon. And that's how much confidence I had in, Pat Elflines of the world. He came to me and said, Coach, we're still sore from that game, because that was, you talk about a sledgehammer game.
Yeah.
So for 2 more days, we didn't even use pads because of the wear and tear on players.
Yeah. That's where the art of coaching comes in, correct? I wanted to ask you this. When you look at Wisconsin, you kind of touched on it a minute ago. This doesn't really look like your grandpa's Wisconsin to a certain extent. And then on top of it, they've got a youngish offensive line coming along and stuff too, right? I mean, a lot of analysts have just pointed out that maybe this is, instead of them just having a factory rolling out these offensive linemen, this may be that year where they're kind of developing on the run and stuff. Do you see that too? What's your take on that?
Yeah, I was kind of shocked that Washington State beat them. I didn't see that happening. I guess Wisconsin's always been one of my favorite places. First of all, you go coach that game there, and the student body. There's certain places that, they beat you to death. The fans, this group, I used to love to, go up there, and so I've always been a fan. I've been a fan of the, Barry Alvarez, the system that they put in place. Whether it was Barry Alvarez, Bielema, Gary Anderson, Christ. It just seems they follow that pattern. It does look a little different. I was amazed at when we were playing. It'd be like every year they come up with a Heisman candidate at running back, and every year you'd see 320-pound linemen. And I was like, my God, how do they do this? And it's because they're not the 5 stars.
Yeah,
they're the guys that develop them. And I still think Mark D'Antonio his tenure at Michigan State and my tenure at Ohio State, Wisconsin, those are the two best I've ever seen at pure development of player.
Who do you like in this one? We might as well jump into that. I mean, it's at a home for Ohio State. It's the fourth of 5 straight opening or season opening games for Ohio State in Ohio Stadium and stuff. Do you like Ohio State? Obviously, the odds makers do.
Yeah, I like them big. I just think the job that Brian Hartline has done recruiting there is second to none.
Yeah.
Corey Dennis and the quarterbacks and Ryan Day. I mean, the offensive skill right now, and they have Coach Alford and those 2 running backs. I watched that team play, and I'm like, my gosh. I mean, I thought we had, depth and skill. And you look out there and you lose 3 first-rounders last year with Olave, Garrett, and I count Jamison Williams, even though he went to Alabama. And you roll out another group that might be better. I just think the firepower is too strong. I think the defense coordinator, Knowles, is doing not good, great. I hear people, even on Big Noon or on Big Ten Network, someone saying, well, they're middle of the pack. I'm like, wait a minute. You played Notre Dame, and you held them to 70 yards, I think, for 2.5 quarters.
Yeah.
Stop with the middle of the pack because, sometimes games get out of hand. You put your 2s in there and, watch the game. And I think they're doing phenomenal.
Yeah. Hey, one other quick thing, Urban, when you watch CJ Stroud, this is what I'm experiencing. When you watch him live, especially in the stadium, I don't think you've gotten to do that yet this year, but he literally, you can see that he sees the field. I mean, his awareness of what's going on in front of him. I mean, does it jump out to you as a coach too? Maybe I'm wrong about that. I mean, I just think he's just every week, he just shows me that he's seeing everybody out there. You know what I mean? I mean, you know how you go from blinders to this, as you develop as a quarterback, but do you see that too in him?
Well, I do, especially when that was brought to me, because I would ask Coach Day and Coach Dennis, and I'd say, tell me, my gosh, does he have a 10 arm? Maybe not a 10 arm, but he's got a good arm.
Yeah.
Does he have a 10 in accuracy like Dwayne Haskins did in my mind? Yeah, he's really accurate, catchable ball. But this is the thing that he does different than, you're talking about not good quarterbacks, great quarterbacks they've had.
Yeah.
He said he sees the field as good or better than anybody they've coached. And I was like, my gosh. And you start slowing it down thinking, how did he know to go there with the ball? It's just, it's skill. You can't just say he was born with it because he must work extremely hard with the film study. And obviously he's getting coached by 2 really strong quarterback coaches. So, yeah, the ability to see the field.
Yeah. And when you develop that, what I call deja vu ability, where you've sort of seen it before on video, from the study and stuff, and it comes alive right in front of you, it just gives you a half-second lead, right?
Yeah, it certainly does. And now that you have Smith and Jigba back and that group, Marvin Harrison Jr. and Fleming, and it's amazing. I saw 2 catches last week, and you're like, Harrison Jr., my gosh. I mean, I just love watching. And the cool thing is they say they are the greatest kids to coach too, which is really neat. And Ohio State fans, make sure you enjoy that because you don't always have those guys.
That's why I keep telling everybody, man, this is the golden age. Basically from when you showed up in 2012 and onward, it has been developing. It's a golden age of Ohio State football, especially on the offensive side of the ball. It's kind of nuts what's going on. And like you said, Julian Fleming, there's a guy most people have forgotten about. He was a 5-star when they recruited him. He makes this ridiculous catch on the sideline that replay. You looked at the replay going, had to have bobbled it, but he did not, and it's just, that's that level that they're dealing with. Right.
And competition brings out the best in you.
Yeah.
And I felt that way when we really got it going at Ohio State. When you're in a street fight to get on the field, that means, and you don't get to watch practice as much, but I mean, you imagine every day of practice, you better show up because there's a guy right behind you that is working every day to take your job. When you have that, there was a point when we had Joey Bosa, Nick Bosa, Chase Young, Sam Hubbard, Tyquan Lewis, and Jalen Holmes.
Yeah.
And think about that.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Every day of practice, I mean, and I was an offensive coach and I stand there and watch these cats come screaming off the ball, and you're like, and then you have Draymond Jones inside, Adolphus Washington, all these players that are just fighting for Michael Bennett, fighting for playing time. And you talk that's when you walk off the field and you feel really good saying, when you don't have that backup, that's when our Marvis and Harrison Jr., Smith and Jigba might pull off the brakes, tap the brakes a little bit.
Yeah.
But when you got people behind you hungry, you have to keep going. And that's why they're getting, that's why the NFL is full of Buckeyes now.
Hey, speaking of walking off the field and feeling good or not, I think everybody's seen that video now. I'm jumping ship here or jumping tracks here now. Everybody's seen that video now of Herm Edwards leaving the field after his team got beat by Eastern Michigan last week. And he veers off to the right because the athletic director and the president of the university, or I think it's president, chancellor, whatever, of Arizona State, are standing there waiting to talk to him for a second. And then you find out later in the day or whatever, Herm Edwards becomes the second Power 5 coach to be fired in September this year. I don't know. I don't know how you handle things, but is September the right time to be firing your coach that you've invested all this time, money, and interest in, who's also turned around and done the same thing? Because this isn't even in the NFL, it's hard to go out and hire, a new coach in the middle of the year. I mean, you kind of dealt with that last year, but that was later in the year. My point is it what head start are you getting on here when you're firing somebody in September? I'm trying to figure that out.
Well, Big Noon Kickoff we had a conference call, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. And I just think it's intriguing. And the intriguing part is that I want to say from 2012 to from 2002 to 2012, there was only like three coaches fired mid-season. The next decade, there's 35. So you have to ask yourself, what changed? What changed was the amount of money that, whether it be donors, whether it be television contracts, it seems like buyouts don't matter, even though the contracts for coaches have escalated so high. So number one, you saw it in Nebraska. If they waited a couple more weeks, buyout would have went down a little bit. And they said they had to make a change before the bye week, I guess. The second thing, Tim, is that early signing day changed the world. I'm not sure people really realize the significance of it. December signing day. And it's something I think it's 85% or 90% of players are signed at. So you have to have, in the perfect world, they hire a coach and he's putting together a staff, a little bit like when I was hired at Ohio State, I was able to put that staff together, but signing date wasn't until February. So there wasn't the panic.
Yeah.
The problem is so far where we got Nebraska and Arizona State, there's a panic right now. There's committed players, there's non-committed players, and there's players that they have to pursue.
Yeah.
And what happens is those coaches on the coaching staff are in survival mode, self-preservation. What does that mean? That means they're not necessarily calling those recruits every night. They're trying to line them. They have a family to take care of. So it's a bad situation for everybody. I kind of like what they did in Ann Arbor, where they were patient with Jim Harbaugh and look at the results. I like the fact that you see that at a couple places. I'm not a big fan of the, yank it, but once again with Arizona State, Nebraska, you just don't know. That's their business.
Yeah.
That I just wanted to discuss the two reasons why. Number one, the money buyout doesn't matter. Number two, early signing day.
But I guess my point is you still can't hire. You're not hiring your next great leader, next great coach, if in fact you find that guy in October. You hope he's not available to January if you follow my drift. Go ahead.
Yeah, but what's happening now is there's agents always involved, and so I promise there's already been contact made with 5 coaches.
Yeah,
via agent, not the coach, because the coach can't, and shouldn't do that. But there's an agent out there that's saying, "Hey, would you be interested in Nebraska? Yes or no?" And then if no, move on.
Yeah. Dude, there was a clamor for you at Nebraska last week. Are you interested in any kind of job coming up? What's your where do you sit right now? You're sitting here analyzing games, et cetera. You seem to be in a comfortable place. I mean, what do you want to tell the people about your availability?
No, I'm really happy at Fox. I'm really happy with lifestyle right now, and I'm flying in today to see grandkids. And
yeah,
I'm happy with what I'm doing.
All right, let's real quick because we can hit some quickies here. Lance Leopold at Kansas has done a hell of a job. He's on everybody's lips right now. Speaking of candidates, et cetera, he won 6 national titles at Wisconsin Whitewater before moving on up to Buffalo, where I think his last 3 years he was 24-10 or 24-16, went to 3 straight bowls. Now he's at Kansas. Kansas, speaking of battle of unbeaten, Kansas versus Duke, a battle of unbeatens this week, 3-0. What little do you know of this coach, and could he be one of those next great things?
Yeah, I think I just have always respected the guys that have won at all levels.
Yeah.
This is not Luke that he's winning. And Kansas is. I've always thought Kansas. You ever go to Lawrence, Kansas? Is beautiful.
Yeah.
I just never understand why. Glenn Mason had it going for a while, and Mangino had him in the Rose Bowl or Orange Bowl. So I've never understood why you get that dark cloud over a place. So yeah, the fact he should be on people's short list. That's not a risk. He might not be a big sexy name or something like that, but that's, in my opinion, when I started doing my research on him and reading about him, I never met him, but the guy's a winner.
Yeah,
that's all you can say about it.
Yeah, I think winners keep winning. I mean, that's my take. Hey, speaking of that, I wanted to talk about USC and what Lincoln Riley and those guys have done, but you vetoed me, and you want to talk about Penn State. I mean, forget about whether Auburn is in a state of upheaval. I mean, whether Harsin could be that next guy that gets the pink slip, but that was a huge win for Penn State, and they sweep Auburn back-to-back seasons and stuff. But you go down there, right? A Big Ten team goes to Auburn and goes to the Southeastern Conference in September and wins. You're impressed with what James Franklin and that group are doing right now, aren't you?
Yeah, I studied that film, and I mean it. There's a narrative which we're all part of that the SEC is so much faster than the Big Ten.
Yeah.
And in 2012, I remember even Shelley said to me, she goes, "You can't beat the SEC because there was a period of time where the Big Ten, every time they played the SEC, would lose, and sometimes lose big. And the speed differential and athleticism was obvious. So we made a concerted effort starting in 12 that we did not necessarily, and I remember in the staff meetings, I tell them, we are not just recruiting against the Big Ten. When you bring a player to this program, it's Alabama, Georgia, that's how and I spent time at Florida a lot of time. Every player that we bring in, and I directed Mark Pantoni to have the same conversation. This is not about the Big Ten. If we want to do a national level, first of all, the Big Ten, in my opinion, back in 2012 was not good.
Yeah.
You watch the videotape, and we played them a couple times. It was just I don't think it was a very good league. And I think it's completely different now. You look at Penn State, that was every offensive line, first of all, dominating line of scrimmage. But that Singleton, I mean, that looked like Zeke Elliott to me. That looked like a guy that he ran away twice. He outran Angles. But then you all of a sudden watch on the perimeter, the skill. Then you watch the defense. That was by far the faster team. And yes, Auburn's going through some stuff, but those players that Auburn have, those are all highly recruited players that are talented guys. So extremely impressed with Penn State, what they did.
Yeah. And it's pretty funny how everybody looked at Ohio State's, for example, schedule this year, and they saw a big-time game with Notre Dame, and they saw a big-time game with Michigan on the regular season, bookending what they thought were pretty easily winnable games. And I'm just going, man, you don't know about a team until you see them play, right? And now you've seen Penn State face some adversity and also go into a tough place and get the job done. Penn State looks like Penn State again, right?
Well, I said that on TV because we went to Purdue, and I stayed right there, and I didn't necessarily feel it as much.
Yeah.
Because Purdue played them great, and it was actually Purdue, I thought, won the game, and then right at the end they did it. But after watching this Penn State team at Auburn, one of the most difficult places to play, and just from start to finish, beat that team up like that.
Yeah.
Penn State, of course, right now. They're certainly, I have them. I think Minnesota, too, keeping that, they're the team to beat in the West. But Penn State, Ohio State, and the Wolverines they look fast. They look athletic. That's great for our conference.
Yeah. I was buying Gopher stock back in the preseason. I mean, I really think what PJ Fleck has done there, he's built a program or rebuilt a program there, and it's, they still may get beat up, but I think you can win the Big Ten West with one loss for sure. You know what I mean? I think it's going to be very interesting. Hey, real quick, I was thinking of, you and I want to do a checkmate moment every week. And I thought a good checkmate moment would have been the way, speaking of Purdue, the way it just frittered away that game last week. at Syracuse with some just oddball things. But then I started thinking, sometimes even in a blowout, there comes that moment, that checkmate moment when the other team realizes it needs to lay its king down. They can keep playing and moving pawns around. And I'm thinking Ohio State, Toledo. Ohio State's a 31 and a half point favorite going into that game finally. And Ohio State takes the ball, just like Ryan Day wanted, takes the ball, boom, clickety-clack right down the track, scores a touchdown. They took the ball from the opening kickoff, and you're going, okay, well, this is what you kind of expected. But then, boom, Daquan Finn, this little nice, elusive quarterback for Toledo, leads them down the field with some hook and crook and some scrambling, and boom, it's 7-7. Ohio State Toledo is 7-7, and Toledo's got to be thinking, okay, wait a minute, what about this new Jim Knowles defense we're going against? Blah blah blah. We're in this game, but what does Ohio State do? Clickety clack right back down the track, and then clickety clack right back down the track after a 3 and out or whatever it was. And that was the moment of truth for a team that thought, hey, for a moment they might be in it, right? But now they're out, and it's important in those games, isn't it, for a team like Ohio State to lay down the law?
You're not playing with robots. These are people.
Yeah.
These are, some very young, some 18, 19-year-olds, and 18, 19-year-olds operate on emotion a lot of times. And you all of a sudden go 7-7 at Ohio State. If they fumble the ball away or screw around 3 and out, and all of a sudden you got this energized outfit called Toledo who has good players.
Yeah.
I compare it to what happened in Nebraska and Oklahoma. Nebraska goes down. That crowd was wild. 85,000 people. You've been there.
Yeah.
And it was upset time. I actually Reggie and I picked them to win. That's how good the crowd was that day. They go down and score. It's 7-0. What does Oklahoma do? They come back and the quarterback runs for like a 60-yard touchdown.
Yeah.
To me, that was the not necessarily checkmate moment, but from that point forward, Oklahoma dominated. Nebraska, all the wind was taken out of the sail. Same with the Toledo. All of a sudden, they're 7-7 and think, okay, here we go. Then bang. So you're very right. Those checkmate moments come a lot of different places. Sometimes it's the end of the game, like the Purdue Syracuse. The other time and you cover that in team meetings, especially with mature people. Say, listen, every once in a while the defense is going to give up something, or if you're the defense coach, maybe the offense turns the ball over. Don't worry, stop them. Everybody does your job, and that was that took the wind right out of Toledo when they went right back down the field.
Hey, last thing before we go, man. I'd like to touch on at least one player a week that maybe jumps out at you, and I think you said him without saying his name, but Dylan Gabriel. It looks like Oklahoma's got something going on, doesn't it? I mean, what concerned me going into this year with Brent Venables' first-time head coach, long-time, big-time assistant defensive coach, what were they going to look like offensively? But I would think you came out of Saturday going, wow, I mean, this kid can play. This transfer from UCF can play.
Yeah, he can play. And I stood on the field, and Oklahoma looks like there's no drop-off there. Maybe a little more emphasis on defense because you have a defense, one of the best coordinators in recent history. They looked, that's real. That's a team that's going to be fighting for a playoff spot. And so impressed. And I mean, it was, I don't know if you got to watch it much. That was a beating.
Yeah.
That was A to Z, absolute beatdown on the road, tough environment with a lot of energy. And, they were 3-0 with 2 minutes left against Kent State at home, and then they started scoring points. So I was like, man, there's something missing at Oklahoma. Nothing's missing.
No.
That kid's a good player at quarterback.
Exactly. October's when you start to really figure these teams out too, man. I mean, what happens in September, like you just said, with Penn State against Purdue, and then Oklahoma against Kent State. I mean, you got to let these teams develop. They got a new identity, et cetera.
Hey, Tim, sometimes we'll find out about a team until a Big Ten championship game in 2014, and a guy named Cardell Jones goes in. So sometimes teams they're alive. They change daily. So yeah, that's what makes college football so good.
Well, I was going to say that earlier in that week you were, anyway. We'll discuss that later on down the road about just how you dealt with the emotions of that. I mean, you think you got this great team, and then your starting quarterback is hurt, and then you think you got this really great team, and then your next quarterback gets hurt, and then this guy who wouldn't pay attention in meetings, et cetera, leads you to the promised land. It's crazy. His nickname should be Moses, I think. Don't you think?
Once again, it's why college football right now is you can transfer portal, NIL. What's wrong with college football? And then you push play, where you turn on TV and say, "Wait a minute, they're this the greatest." To me, it's unbiased. There's nothing like it.
Amen, brother. We'll leave it on that note, because that's why they play the games, because you never know when somebody's going to just summon it. Urban Meyer, Urban's Take with Tim May. Enjoyed it, my man. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, Tim.